Hi there, and welcome to the final episode of ETMN for the school year. Jeremy and I today have the pleasure of hosting a principal from school district number 83, which is the North Okanagan Shushwap district, and his name is Ian Landy. So Ian is with us today, and he is an educator and principal who is pushing technologization. I don't even know how he says that in education. And he's an advocate for a better understanding of anxiety in education. And I actually had the pleasure of going to one of his sessions this week at Can Flip 14 in Kelowna. So that was really wonderful that I got to meet him face to face before we do this interview today. Really neat. He's also advocating for piloting e-portfolios instead of report cards in his school, and he works with his kids to do self-organized learning environments and Genius Hour, and he also is renowned for his 184 days of blogging. So lots of stuff going on up there in School District 83. So we'll get talking with him in a sec. If you are following along with the podcast live today, you can get at us on the Google Plus event page. There's a question and answer feature below if you want to ask some questions live. Or you can get at us on the ETMN hashtag on Twitter, or of course at our Google Plus community. So welcome, Ian. We are really excited to have you and talk to you about all the cool things that are going on in your district.
Thank you very much.
All right, so let's get talking shop. I guess I am the most curious to share with folks, because you talk about these things called SOLs a lot, which stands for self-organized learning environment. So where did you get this idea, and how does it play out in your school with students?
Yeah, it's been an interesting journey. I started off for the past number of years working with Genius Hour, different incarnations of it, starting off as pilot projects, passion projects, things to do for an hour here and there. And over time, it's come along to that idea of Genius Hour, where specifically individuals have that hour a week to work on and learn about anything that it is that they want to learn about. Then over the course of the summer, I encountered a book by Sugata Mitra. He's the educator who did The Hole in the Wall out in India, where essentially he threw in a computer into some rural parts of India and let kids learn. And over about the next 8-9 years, he started to play around with some of the work that he was seeing the kids doing. Because it started off seeing it was very individualized, but then it became more and more of a community of learners, where students were helping students learn how to solve problems. So spent the whole 99 cents for his most latest book, Beyond the Hole in the Wall, and started reading about these things called self-organized learning environments. Did a little bit of research on the website to see what it was that he was getting at, and almost couldn't believe the TED Talk videos that he was showing and some of the other sub-movies that I was able to Google, because it really took the movement of student-led learning to a higher level, where essentially we would ask some deep questions to start off the day, or start off the session, and then students would organize themselves into different groups and essentially solve that question, which would then lead to deeper and deeper questions. At first I tried to tweak it into the schedule that we had currently at the school that I'm principal of, and I had 60 minutes. And what we were finding over the first couple of weeks, 60 minutes was really too short of time to really get invested and do some learning. So I went back to the book, looked at it, and sure enough, he says, do 90 minutes. Switched it to 90 minutes, and we started taking off. And what I started to use the SOLs for was to explore science and social studies learning outcomes by posing questions to the learners that way. And then, sure enough, over the next few weeks, we saw students organizing themselves in different groups, sometimes as small as 2, sometimes as big as 8. Both of those are a little bit too much on the extreme side. That 4-to-6 ratio always seemed to work out the best. And after 90 minutes, they would have something, a piece of paper, a report, a poster. My students started getting into more PowerPointing and keynoting what they were finding. A couple were even looking at videos in order to share what they learned over that 90-minute session. And all student directed, as Sugata Mitra showed in one of his videos. He went to a school in Italy, asked the teachers to leave, wrote the questions was on the board, and he was able to get the kids engaged even though he didn't speak the language. So that part has definitely been a very powerful journey this year.
So do you have the students responsible for showing out, demonstrating what they've learned in that 90 minutes or after 90 minutes? Is it that?
Within that 90 minutes.
So you've got 90 minutes to learn
and share.
Wow.
Yeah. So usually we'd say at about the 60-minute point, we'd say, okay, guys, start to narrow down and prepare to share out. And I mean, it's always plus or minus a couple minutes. And I mean, some students who I have who have written output issues, they struggled dramatically at the start. But the more they got into it and the more they learned that they could do other ways to represent their learning, they were engaged in the learning process, and they either got into groups where they could speak the answer and somebody else would write to it, or they'd use pictures, or in one case, when we were looking at endangered animals, one of the students found a great video on the spirit bear and shared that.
So what age range are we talking about here?
For me, I'm doing it with my grade 4s and 5s, but we're looking at expanding it down to the grade 3s, and I've heard up to, well, it goes on from there. Most of Sugata's work and my work have tended to be in that 9 to 15 year range.
Mm-hmm.
I really like that. I like the idea of having that structure there. I chose not to do Genius Hour this year with my class. I didn't feel that I was able to provide the structure that would make it to be successful, but the idea of you're in and done in 90 minutes just sets up the expectations for learning and being on task and being accountable to then maybe move it on to something bigger and work on bigger problems. Not to say those are even not big problems, but 90 minutes is wow.
Yeah, totally. So are they all exploring? They're then exploring questions around those subject matters. So it's like thematic Genius Hour, if I could dare to say that.
Yeah, a thematic collaborative Genius Hour is not a bad way to describe it. I look at my Genius Hours being much more flexible, and even I've changed over the course this year where it was focused on the individual. In September, we started having students kind of blend Souls and Genius Hour together so that they could get extra time to work on something or to extend something. We took one project around the human body, and a few students chose to do some extra work in Genius Hour to make larger representations of how the human systems work together, because that's something that they're interested in. They want to be doctors. So this is a great way for them to explore it at an early age and start building some of that curiosity and start having them to start to ask some of those important questions as well.
That's really interesting. Yeah, I guess, so what are the things that you see the kids growing in then? Do you see their collaborative efforts grow a lot? Are they collaborating with different people, or do they tend to choose the same groups? How does the social aspect of that fit in?
The fun part for me, since I've been using technology in my class for a decade or more, really, about 8 years ago, though, when I was teaching in Lumbee, I actually had a whole class set of computers pretty much full-time with my class. And that was the first time that we really saw the level of community building that can occur with technology and some of these unguided and guided structure time. My first exposure to it really was around GarageBand, where I'd be challenging the students to create a song for their dad for Mother's Day, for Father's Day, but the catch was I didn't know how the program worked. I mean, it was a lie. I knew how to get them to the end as necessary, but for the most part, it was an opportunity for students to try things, make mistakes, make discoveries, and when kids made discoveries, they became the genius and the master for the next 15 minutes to 2 or 3 days, because there'd always be somebody away who'd come in and have a question, and the kids would send them off to go talk to that student there. They know all about it. And I've seen that in the years since, where instead of really focusing in on having it be their own work, it's more of a collaborative effort. What I love some of my students in particular, they're starting to use some of the language that we introduced in Souls into math class. And I'll have one girl regularly come up and say, Mr. Landy, for math, can we do research? Because Sumitra talks about that research being community-wide, where if somebody has an idea, you research it or steal it. It's kind of the same thing. And that element that you're helping each other learn really was a tipping point within the classroom and the class community. The competition went down, and it actually brought out, beyond just the collaboration, elements of creativity. Students who were fantastic artists and drawers started gravitating to doing more poster work. Other students found other mediums. I had a collection of 3 boys who were fantastic at making videos. And what we found is the students would self-organize themselves based on either their interests. So sometimes all the artists would work together on something, but more times than not, they'd pick and choose and say, I kind of want to learn how that video thing worked. And they'd hang out with that group for a couple of weeks, learn some of those tricks, and start taking it out into Genius Hour and into some of the other subject areas as well.
Great. So I might be known a little bit for thinking pragmatically here and there. When you've got students out, you discuss questions and they organize into groups. How does the research happen? What does that look like?
So we start in our classroom, and then we invade our learning commons because we have limited resources in our room. So in our school, we have a fake learning commons. Essentially, in the upstairs of our school, we have a library, and unfortunately, we have a lot of time with the librarian not in the building. So we have that room. We have our dinosaur desktop room for a little bit longer, my great embarrassment, and then an open classroom as well. So essentially, between those and by having our iPads that are definitely the more popular route for the kids to use, and bring your own devices, on the days I'm in the classroom, especially Genius Hour and Soul days, I always seem to have extra school-based devices left over. And from that, essentially the way we declare it, if you need silent work time, you're in the library. If you need louder time, you can go into the upstairs classroom because there's nobody around there. If you need talk or question time, there's the main classroom. And then there's the computer lab if you need to print things off. And then essentially it's me migrating around, popping in, seeing where the kids are at, making sure that they know what that they remember what the question is, and if they're getting ahead on that, then I start probing them with some deeper questions as well.
Awesome.
It's embracing chaos in many times, because I mean it feels sometimes that you've got kids going everywhere. The positive side is we've got kids going everywhere, and the school's used to it now, so that I mean, essentially, I have other teachers checking in on them for me, asking what they're doing, what they're learning, and asking all the key questions I'd be doing, and reinforcing that learning community going beyond just me as a teacher in a classroom.
Great. So really embracing the spaces and devices that are available in multiple ways. And it's good to hear that you can use those dinosaurs too, because too many of our classes or schools, that's kind of the main piece of technology.
I'm working on it.
I was just going to say as well that it's really cool that chaos is getting embraced by the school. So how has you rolling this out impacted your school culture?
Well, as I said, one of the plus sides is all my teachers seem to have their kids in my classroom. So that's been a scary thing, but it's also been a very beneficial part where when kids are going home and talking about their learning, that's a little bit different than the way it was in many kids' cases. I've had students who would be away Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, but they know Friday's Genius Hour, that's when they're there. When Soul started popping up, suddenly they'd drag themselves in on the Wednesdays as well. And what that really fostered for the kids first was that excitement that they have control of their learning. What that's also done for the other teachers that I'm working with is I've modeled that I'm okay with doing things non-traditionally, and I've seen them start to pick up on that. One of my teachers has embraced Genius Hour and starting to morph it into an area called Wonderwall for some of the younger kids, where it's more of a guided, gradual release of responsibility around Genius Hour, where we're taking them on a little bit of a journey to make choices. Because what I've saw, especially at the start of Souls, is that implementation dip is horrendous. And same thing with Genius Hour. When first brought up, it's a bit of a failure. Things drop off, and then it picks up once everyone gets comfortable with it. So for me, it's been modeling, because our school has a large number of anxiety students, and even some of us anxious teachers, brings that idea that failure is okay. That's part of the learning process, and it's part of the bigger learning game as well.
Yeah, and that can't be more right. Like, that's definitely something that I believe wholeheartedly in, is that we have to take a step forward and try something, and we might fail, but that's where the best learning happens. So that's really, I think, valuable to have in leadership for sure. So how does, like, you talked a little bit about anxiety, and I know you do a bit of work with making folks aware of anxiety, and you do a bit of work with that. So can you talk about that a little bit and how it fits into all of these programs you're running?
Yeah, on my blog, I think it was around day 110 of 184. I was having a rough day, and I definitely vented out some of my the work that I've done over the past years around anxiety. Part of it has been, as a classroom teacher, the anxious learners seem to always gravitate to my classroom. So I knew something had to be done different. I've got a good nature around me, so kids like that, but there's always a lot of bit of anxiety, especially teaching in grade 4, with sometimes being the first male teacher that the kids will encounter.
Right.
So programs like Friends for Life were just absolutely fantastic. Really got me thinking a lot more about the mindfulness of listening to body cues. So I've been doing a lot of work with that, but then, and what I thought was getting good results. And then my son had developed general anxiety disorder, and I realized that I was barely scraping the surface in terms of the prevalence of anxiety and the work that needs to be done, just understanding it, let alone working with it. And by that I mean, in many cases, that the general anxiety disorder can really seem like a behavior issue. The kids don't want to learn, the kids don't want to do the writing, the kids don't want to do math, and it's not a behavioral. It really is that the brain gets stuck, and it's they can't do the writing, they can't do the written output. And sometimes even the standardized tests don't tell the full picture, because we had one set of tests done for my son focused on the learning, and it came out that he was struggling dramatically with math. Our district here, though, also does a gifted test as well. And that one actually showed that, no, he's pretty much on that borderline, plus minus 1%, of being a gifted mathematician. So it really brings up those different levels of these kids learn different, and they need different supports to get them into the school and into the classroom, which is number one to me, and then to become engaged in their learning. And at the school I moved down to, I was looking at school goals, and they were typically what I kind of expected: a bit of reading, a bit of writing, some social responsibility. But after after just a couple weeks, we had our staff meeting, and I was just saying, it seems to me like there's a lot of anxiety. And every single teacher was, oh my gosh, so and so does this, and we have that pop up. It got to the point when we started tracking it and seeing how big of a concern anxiety was at our school, that approximately 1/3 of our students had noticeable anxiety. And that ranged everything from math phobics to the full-blown general anxiety disorder. The ones that I say, I have conversations with the parents at the same time, but tell the students, until you puke, you're not sick enough to go home. And that doesn't mean I threw up in the toilet and cleaned it up, Mr. Landy. That means I kind of need to see the grossness wherever it is. Because kids like that are tricky, they lie, and they are very good at it because they're not in control. Their bodies make them exhibit all those key characteristics that look like somebody who is physically sick. My son gets pale, pretty much runs a temperature, and has like a cold sweat going on. I've had other students who literally fall down almost like they're having a seizure. And it's just the body essentially saying anything but the scariness of being inside the classroom. And it takes a lot of time, but the time does pay off. I had 2 of my particular math phobics this year with one of the math programs I was running go from absolutely being scared of math to actually having that be one of their highlights each month and each week. And that's not just me by myself, please, especially with anxiety. Elements of cognitive behavior therapy need to be involved, counseling, with math, even math tutors, and it's about embracing the whole person as what their learning needs really are.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, I vented again.
No, but that you know what? That's important to look at the whole person and to look at all of the different supports that are required to help those types of issues with kids. And I mean, I think that some adults actually go through a lot of that stuff too with some of the things going on. I know, I almost, like, I should have an anxiety disorder now after the past few weeks. Hey, Jeremy?
Well, and
Yeah, it's been tough. Yeah.
and one of the frustrations is anxiety really isn't diagnosable beyond either severe behavior or the blanket cure-all of mental support needed, and it is that little bit different than that. And it's also why I do so much of the work around Genius Hour and Souls, to allow the students who need that individual time where they're just by themselves, that they can work on that. And even in groups, if they need to work with a particular friend, they get to. Or if they need to work in a bigger group so they can kind of hide behind and just have their little bits added in, they have those opportunities as well. And then that permeates into the rest of the learning environment throughout the day.
Right. Do you find that the open-ended nature of Genius Hour and Souls allows for those kids to express themselves and not just be focused on, like, the one answer as well?
Yeah, it's been an interesting journey, because I know a lot of the kids really love the idea of Genius Hour without deadlines. It scared many of my parents when they'd say, well, when's this due? And I say, grade 11-ish, and that's a long ways down the line. But the idea is, once they discover what their passion is, that's a great self-regulation tool. When students know that painting helps them calm down and gets them focused, that's a helpful thing for the school to know. When we know that even playing video games or talking about video games or designing video games can be self-soothing. Well, my son's created 200 original Pokemon characters at last count, and I'm sure there might be another 50 over the past month as well. And I mean, in terms of showing creativity, I mean, these are original characters with entire backstories to them, all done as a way for him to help self-manage. So you get that element of finding what works for yourself, and then as well through Souls, you get to do a little bit of exploration. Can I represent my learning via posters? Okay, nope, because my penmanship is hideous. What if I do a poster on a computer? Okay, that's a bit better. Why don't I see what those kids are doing with the movies and working on a video? Or. You get lots of opportunities because it's 90 minutes. If at the end of the day you get nothing, or it looks horrible, or you go, that didn't work, that's as important as actually doing some other significant learning and having a little bit of tidbit of information.
Mm-hmm. Do you find that any of them, I guess I think too, like on the other end of, not enough choice and there's only one answer, but is there ever too much choice for those kids? Are there kids that struggle with decision making?
Yeah, that's one of the key things especially when they first encounter it. And I've been on some of the Genius Hour chats where people are saying, man, this kid's been on it for 2 hours, they still don't have an idea. This year in particular, we spent a lot of time because we had a second class coming on board with Genius Hour after we had started ours, to really stop and take a little look at some of the decisions they were and weren't making. And what we really found is, in particular in our community, a lot of the kids didn't really know how to make a choice. Their days were essentially planned for them. They woke up, breakfast was kind of laid out for them. They'd come to school where it was locked up till recess, to lunch, till the bus at the end of the day, go home, and then they had earlier in the year made a choice of either soccer or karate. So they went to that evening event, and then they'd come back for a dinner, a little bit of reading and time with the family, and to bed, and then repeat. So the decision-making part was out of their lives. And one of our highest performing academic grade 3s coming into grade 4, who we thought this would be perfect for, struggled tremendously. She went from wanting to do painting to wanting to do baking to wanting to do coding to just a different thing every week. And I mean, it was definitely frustrating for the teacher, and even for myself for a little bit. But at the same time, going back and trusting the process, knowing that the kids are going to get there, because in a sense they're taking off check marks of things that they thought they were interested in, but an interest isn't necessarily a passion, and that can be just as important. Much like a few years ago, I had 3 grade 7 kids who wanted the world to stop using oil. After about 4 weeks, they suddenly realized that was a much bigger task than what 3 students could do on their own. So they started to narrow it down considerably.
So it just takes time. Just let them run their course.
And at the point, I'm at the point where I do trust the process. And likewise with the adults in my building as well. Different group of teachers, but we had a professional learning community with some interlopers watching what we were doing, and they were nudging me at one point saying, they're off task, you need to get them back on, you need to get them back on task. And I was just like, no, 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 we know what we're doing. And sure enough, within a couple minutes, we were right back on task and moving things forward the way that we wanted to do to get alignment. And the outsiders were looking and going, how'd that happen? And essentially, we just trusted the process. We had practiced it enough times that we knew that as a collective, we were going to get to where we needed to go. So even now at Souls, if I go upstairs and the kids seem a little bit off task, sometimes I don't even intervene. I just watch what happens, and they get themselves back into their group, get themselves refocused, and keep on the learning process.
Mm-hmm. And I see that too. I run Daily 5 in my classroom, and there's a lot of self-organization, self-regulation, and maintaining my own focus as I go through the 5 things that I need to do in the day. There's a lot of that, and they might have that moment where they're off, but they usually will catch themselves. It's really
it's usually the moment right when you're looking at them as well. So.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. We only have a few minutes left, so I'm just going to ask, I don't know, Jeremy, if you have more questions about that. I'm going to jump into the blogging.
The only thing I'm curious about is the assessment piece when it comes to Souls. Having such an open-ended way of demonstrating your learning, what type of expectations are set there to be able to assess them?
Oh yeah, we do a variety of assessment, but it's portfolio assessment. We're a school that's piloting e-portfolios this year and
which
finding
we
that
brushed on yet.
Sorry?
So which we haven't even brushed on yet. We've got 2 minutes. Go.
Well, essentially, it's shifting from reporting student achievement. So instead of just saying, yeah, the student completed a worksheet on human body's circulatory system, we're communicating the learning, which is definitely the new language being extolled, and definitely feels a lot more comfortable with things like Genius Hour and Souls, because you can't do a ranked comparison between a student who does a poster project versus a 3-page written report or a fictional story or a diorama. They're so different, other than essentially, did they accomplish the task? If the task was show me how two systems in the human body interact with each other, did they accomplish that? Yes, no. And then the more important part in my mind is the descriptive feedback that goes with that from what I saw, and the feedback that they've given me as part of the feedback loop, which then goes into either a video or a picture, which then gets uploaded to an e-portfolio so that the parents get to see it. Not just get to see a human body come home and maybe a little sticker on it or something. Sorry, I haven't used check marks or anything for about 7 years, so I'm a little rusty on what people are using for that nowadays. But that descriptive feedback piece has been essential, and that comes from a lot of my dads who are getting some of the e-portfolios while they're up in the oil fields in northern BC and northern Alberta.
So right. So what are you using for e-portfolios? What kind of
right now we're using an app called FreshGrade. They're a company based out of Kelowna, so they're Canadian, they're local. They've got all the bells and whistles when it comes to being point and click, so that it's simple enough where my teachers who declare themselves very non-technological were leading the way. They were the ones who are uploading the most amount of material. They're the ones who are really exploring and pushing the boundaries of what could be done up on it. And it's FOIPOP FIPA compliant, and it's going to talk to BC Ed Connect and all the other programs that are have been available and have been used. So it's meeting all the check marks as far as my school district's going, and as far as my parents are going. I've gotten more positive feedback on the e-portfolios this year than ever before on any of the varied report card templates that we've used.
That's awesome. Yeah, and we were in a FreshGrade session this week at Kentlet,
That's right.
And it was really good. It was really informative and cool to see how the app is developing and how open they are to just teacher input and kind of moving forward in the future of what we kind of want to see in the app. So, yeah.
Well, and for me, the biggest selling point is really, especially as we are getting into report card season, while a lot of my colleagues and a lot of teachers that I know were talking about the report card, my teachers are still talking about the learning. The conversation has shifted from device and from tasks right to more and more individual learning, and just going into this student learns different, so we're just going to show how they learn. And then there's an archive there so that next year's teacher is going to be able to see it, not just read about it.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Any comments, Jeremy, on that? Like, I mean, we've seen kind of some of fresh grade jumping into BC Ed Chat every now and again.
Yeah, a little bit, and I mean, I'm seeing that recurring theme of how just these local companies, and not even local companies, but some of the smaller companies and online are just so open to feedback, which can only be a good thing.
Yeah, totally. We are actually out of time, so
How'd that happen? We're not done.
I know. We have so much stuff to talk about, but a lot of what Ian has talked about today can be found on his blog. So if you do want to check that out, that is TechnoLandy. That's TechnoLandy.wordpress.com, and you can check out he blogged for 184 days of school.
Wow. 4 more days to go, because we combine those Pro-D days into the regular calendar. So.
Okay, so we have 4 more days to go. Holy smokes. And he actually did it every single day. And I have a trouble blogging once a month, so I don't know how you...
Wasn't easy.
Once a day. Crazy, crazy. So if you want to check out some of his stuff, you can get him there. You can also get him on Twitter at TechnoLandy, or you can just throw out some questions to the ETMN hashtag. If you have any more, I'll make sure they get forwarded on to him. So thank you for joining us today, Ian. We really appreciated having you on.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, it was great having you here, Ian.
Yeah, for anybody who is an ETMN viewer, just kind of stay tuned to the hashtag and the Google Plus community for future podcasts and things that are coming up in the community. We are going to be taking our summer hiatus, and just kind of stay tuned to the hashtag and the community and maybe the website, and we'll let you know when stuff is coming up in the fall. Have a good night, everybody.